जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम उमर साहब have also joined us जी। उमर साहब कैसे हैं आप?
जी वालेकुम अस्सलाम वैद अस्सलाम वालेकुम एवरीवन। अल्लाह का शुक्र है, आप सब खैरियत से हैं।
जी अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह ऑल गुड। जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर माजिद फैसल साहब सर फैसल हाउ आर यू जी? मिस फाइजा is here as well.
हेलो
Uh,
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
जी वालेकुम अस्सलाम मिस फाइजा कैसी हैं आप?
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
जी वालेकुम
और
अस्सलाम। So I think yeah we're pretty much all here, so we'll just be starting in just a couple of minutes. जी डॉक्टर खालिद is here as well. I think we can start since we're all here. So, first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today in today's Green Financing Summit, driving the energy transition through alternate and green financing mechanisms. My name is Ubaidur Rahman, and I'll be your master of ceremony today. So, this summit has been organized by Sustainable Development Policy Institute under the auspice of a Network for Clean Energy Transition. And I think all of us here, we do understand the need and the whole point of the importance and the significance of green financing and the climate financing to enable this energy transition. And I think to enable that discussion, we'll be having two dedicated panel discussions today. First, we'll be analyzing the how to enable the clean energy transition by looking at the role of different financing institutions, and we're very pleased to have also been joined by Faisal Shafat from State Bank of Pakistan. We do have colleagues from the commercial bank, including Mr. Umar from the Bank of Punjab, Mehboob Alam San from Mizan Bank. Will very shortly be joined by Ms. Kola from Microfinancing Mobilink Bank Limited as well. And we do have some subject experts, including Dr. Majid, Ms. Faiza, and other colleagues as well. So in the next round, we'll actually be taking stock of different alternate financing mechanisms that can also currently exist that can also support this transition. Which will also be talking perhaps about different just energy transition partnerships, the carbon markets. But yeah, just to very briefly set the scene of what we're going to discuss today. But I think let's first start by setting some of the housekeeping rules from my end, and then after which I'll be requesting Dr. Sajid Amin Javed, the Deputy Executive Director of Research at Sustainable Development Policy Institute, for his opening remarks. So, just to quickly set some of the housekeeping rules, along with Zoom, the event is being live streamed on X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I can already see some very good engagements happening on the LinkedIn as well. So the speakers are encouraged to switch on their cameras, especially when they're speaking, as long as the network allows them to do so. The webinar is being recorded and the video will be posted online. You're all welcome to revisit the discussion later, and please feel free to share it within your networks as well. We do invite questions and comments from our audience and colleagues at the end of the session, each panel or as the session goes. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and the moderator will ask those questions from the relevant panelists. And those who want to actually speak something from our audience can also raise their hand, and our MIS team will allow them to sort of speak as well. So yeah, with this, I'll be coming to you, Dr. Sajid, for your welcome remarks and setting a bit of a scene for this whole summit that we're going to do today. Yeah, with this, over to you, Dr. Sajid.
Thank you, Obed. As a standard start, can you hear me? I hope you can. Great.
Yes.
I'm
we can.
assuming you can. I think I'll start with a couple of bringing. This discussion is very crucial, and particularly at this point of time in Pakistan. And I've been clearly saying in your events and many other places that transition towards green energy is Pakistan's transitions towards a sustainable economy. It's not only environment, it is the economy. The energy problem has been Pakistan's macroeconomic problem. Actually. So bringing from this perspective and also bringing together such an excellent group of people from State Bank of Pakistan, from commercial banks, all together. And this is very difficult to bring together all these stakeholders on the table, and that you have really done. So I'm really thankful to you and to the colleagues, those who have joined us. I'm sure you will be discussing much more on it, but I'll just, as you have given me just 5 minutes, so I'll just summarizing. To me, the transition towards green energy or green financing requirements are such a huge that they cannot be left on the government. Actually. No public sector can meet these huge demands that we need. For example, even in Pakistan, if we have to green our transport sector only, well, roughly around $35 billion are needed. And if we wanted to do it in the next 10 years, it's $3.5 billion a year. And this is roughly equal to the half of the IMF program that we have had in the last 3 to 4 years, including standby agreement and others. So this is the amount of fuel required for green transition, energy transition, and overall. So I think one of the key role and one of the critical factor will be a very sound financial system, which enables sort of right financial solutions at the right time. So that will be very, very critical in transition towards this green energy or overall green financing, because it will take a market, not a government, to finance this green energy. When I say it's take a market, very robust and sound financial market that supports, enables, de-risk green investments, green financing instruments. So you will need a very clear set of policies in this regard. What are the policies for green financing, green investments? Number two, what are the financial instruments that are available to the different, by the size of investments. For example, in Pakistan, so far the focus has been the larger corporates, the big firms coming in as them. But I said this cannot be left on the government. It cannot be left on the big firms because they don't have that capacity to meet that huge amount of financing requirements. No larger firms can do. You have to bring in everybody, every investor, and particularly I think one of the critical factors will be the small investors. So once a small investor like me, like Obed, like anybody else, thinks that I should invest in green instruments, and when there is a pooling starting, that I think will be very critical. And in this context, I think the very critical role will be the State Bank of Pakistan. And it's good to see that State Bank of Pakistan in-house and external engagements that are on the green sort of green investment policies and other initiatives that the State Bank of Pakistan is taking. And as a regulator and as a custodian of the commercial banking, I think it's very encouraging to see, but I think we will be listening more that what are the policies they are adopting, how proactively they are going to chase this transitions towards green. What I would love to see going forward, most probably, that this focus on green investment should not be a residual focus. It should not be a sideline focus. both in the central banking and with the commercial banks as well. Rather, I think it should be our mainstream policy. The green should be the mainstream, and the non-green should be the residual focus. And for this, I think I'll just close with three quick that we need to do. The number one is on the very clear set of policies and the frameworks which are driving our financial system, including the commercial banks. That will be critical, number one. I think we have to create that environment. We need that guides us to very innovative financial solutions. It will sort of include your financial instruments, your de-risking instruments, all those assessments. So this will be the second. And the third is a very clear mapping of those sectors in the green investments, in the green financing. So if I think we can club all these three together, that can be a beginning towards it. But lastly, I think one challenge that, of course, our central bank is also facing and the banking sector is also facing is sort of mixed signals from the government. And if we have some colleagues around the table on the government, I think all this will happen in an ecosystem where the signals are very, very clear that Pakistan government and all the political leadership is striving towards green energy. We are seeing some mixed signals on net metering. This, of course, creates a noise in the policy noise, actually, and the priority noise. The commercial banks and the financial sector then do have some concerns. Who should they finance and who should they not? So I think right signaling will also be very careful. I think we will be hearing much more from the experts on this one. So this was from overall from my side. Once again, thank you for bringing this discussion on table, and we look forward to recommendations and highlights coming from today's discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sajid. Such a well established scene. So yeah, fully agree with the points to have the clear signals, provide enabling environment, and a clear mapping of those sectors that need to go forward. So yeah, I think Dr. Sajid has set a very right scenes we can sort of take forward. Based upon that, I think, and just connecting this with the first point that mentioned that the climate financing needs of Pakistan are very large, because when we actually are talking about this energy transition, I mean, we fully understand that technologically it makes sense. We need to understand that in the long run, it has a good economic case, it has a good environmental case. But the point is that how do we actually enable that transition? Because energy transition has a cost as well as some logistical needs that are very imperative for driving its transition. So just in context of that, just last year we started sort of mapping out that what are exactly some of the climate financing needs when we talk about clean energy transition in Pakistan. So we'll be showing you just very brief numbers, and then I'll be coming to Zainab, Dr. Zainab, for initiating and moderating the first session. So yeah, that study was initially, if MIS team can kindly allow me to share the screen, I'll just be showing you in 5 to 7 minutes some of the key numbers. Yeah, so if you can please enable the screen sharing options. So basically the whole idea here was to sort of understand how to unlock the private sector finance for achieving the national incoming contributions of Pakistan. So in which we actually sort of adopted this mixed method approach, in which we actually sort of tried to analyze, look at the different numbers of how much finance has already been generated, what are some of the key sources of financing, and where this finance has actually gone over the past past few years. So yeah, if MIS team, if you can kindly allow me to share the screen, it is currently able. Yeah. So in the meanwhile, let me just sort of set the scene till that is set up. So I mean, we fully understand that climate financing in Pakistan has remained somewhat of a challenge. Even when we talk about these green climate funds or green transition funds, we haven't been able to tap all those very efficiently. They have been limited. They have been limited technical expertise. They have been limited institutional capacities. We sort of are still in the process where we're developing these different proposals, but with the comparatively limited access. But again, when we actually talk about opportunities, a substantial share of investment opportunities are there. I mean, unofficially, perhaps if you talk about the private sector has actually raised a lot of financing, even just like we're talking about the solar, a lot of investments have actually gone into the solar side as well. So yeah, I think it's I hope Zainab, is the screen visible? Yeah, Dr. Khalid? Is the screen visible?
Yes, Subir.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'll just quickly come to the numbers, perhaps. So this is one of the studies that we actually started last year in collaboration with the Private Financing Advisory Network, with an aim to sort of understand that how the distribution of private sector investments in Pakistan have been, and how those investments can actually be driven towards clean energy projects. And then we also sort of try to identify what are some of very key challenges and barriers that do exist. So I won't be going into the methodology. I mainly want to at this stage show you some of the numbers. Yeah, this is more or less the climate financing landscape of Pakistan. Like most of it has been sourced through the domestic sources, that is either the public sources or the private. And the second major channel is the development partners, that is the multilateral banks or different multilateral funds. The capital markets do exist, but currently in Pakistan, they're not at that developed stage, but they do provide a promising opportunity for growth. Yeah. Okay, so I think in 2021, when Pakistan put forward its national determined contribution, and in the following year, the World Bank Group conducted its study on country climate and development report, they did adopted a methodology through which they sort of define how much financing would be required if Pakistan has to enable that clean energy transition. So we sort of use somewhat similar methodology, but since the cost wasn't aggregated over there, these are few of the numbers that we came up with, and they're pretty much based upon the same methodology that was adopted by the World Bank CCDR team, and but uses the new projections of Pakistan's indicated generation capacity expansion plan (IGCEP) that came out in 2022. So as per that, I mean, I'm looking at the energy transition from these 3 to 4 perspectives. I'll be showing, firstly, we're looking at more towards the power sector. Like, for example, if we have to achieve the targets of Pakistan's renewable energy, or I'll be saying the targets that are present in Pakistan power capacity expansion plan, then the wind energy would approximately require 20.5 billion of investments by 2030, and almost 15 billion by investments have to go into the solar large scale projects as well. Hydropower, although still again debatable, has an investment need of somewhere around 23 billion. The transmission and distribution currently needs the most largest investments, roughly around 26 billion. And Pakistan's NDCs also mentioned that if Pakistan has to replace some of the previous projects, some of the thermal projects with the coal, and the buyout of different coal power plants that do exist, yeah, so that would roughly cost us a combined total of $31 billion. So as per the themes that were identified in the Pakistan's NDCs, so Pakistan's climate financing or renewable energy transition would approximately require almost 115.7 billions by 2030. So, I mean, what we're actually trying to see here is it's actually a large investment need that is actually required. So moving forward from this point, yeah. Okay, going beyond the just the power sector, this is what energy efficiency and the transport decarbonization would require. So energy efficient industries, when you talk about, this is as per the NECA's strategic plan 2023, based upon the figures mentioned over there, and how much we sort of calculate how much investments would be needed if those targets of NECA are to achieve. So energy efficiency in industries would require approximately 9.8 billion by 2030, and the efficiency improvement targets for the building sector would require almost 5.5 billion. So energy efficiency as a whole will roughly require almost 15 billion, and the decarbonization of the transport sector, which includes the conversion, the installation of new infrastructure, the transition cost of the current stock, and also the revival of railways, that's approximately going to cost Pakistan approximately 57 billions by 2030. And when we actually talk about how much of this has to come from the private sector, what indicator we used was actually the private sector equity, based upon what historical trends have been in the given that based upon all the wind power plants that have been installed already, what has been the equity ratio. So based upon that, sort of came up with different numbers that for wind power equity, it would be roughly around 3 to 8 billion that would be actually required during this time period. And the highest, I think, investments that were actually would required would be, as per, again, I'm linking everything with the NDCs. These are all calculated as per the interventions highlighted in Pakistan's national determined contribution. So electric vehicles currently would actually need a substantial amount of cost. So as for the private sector, almost 48 to 63 billion will be required, or from the overall investment need, almost 48 to 63 billion has to be generated by the private sector through its equities. Yeah, okay. If we look at the current, what has been the current status of the private sector investment, we actually sort of, this is something from the share of the public and the private sector sources and gross fixed investment. It shows that the 72% of the gross has been the share coming from the private sector, and the rest has been coming from the public sector. We sort of analyzed the portion of loan portfolios, that what loan portion has actually gone towards which of the sectors, in which we actually saw that the real estate and these other sectors attracted comparatively. The manufacturing sector has actually attracted the largest amount of loans. We've also highlighted some of the figures that were highlighted here by the State Bank of Pakistan as well. When we actually talk about the energy sector, then thermal power plants have actually sort of attracted a lot more of it as compared to when we talk about the renewable energy capacity. So these are some of the figures where we've actually, other numbers that we've actually taken through the using State Bank as well as other Pakistan Bureau of Statistics as well as economic survey data sets as well. So when we actually talk about what actually drives the private sector investment, we also did a lot of key informant interviews, a lot of consultations prior to this as well. So the four key enabling parameters that we actually came up with was the bankability of the projects, how the private sector see the business potential of investment, and the guarantee of return on investment, what it's actually going to get. This was second, this came out as a second key pillar for mobilizing the private finance. The third one actually was the financial incentives and the policy measures, which includes different subsidies that have been offered, any amnesty schemes or different tax redemptions. And the fourth one was actually the risk security and guarantee mechanisms that are actually being offered into that sector as well. After that, we sort of analyzed that what climate financing instruments do exist, and based upon this is something I'm showing you based upon different consultative discussion, that what do stakeholders or the financing experts in Pakistan see the relevance of different financing instruments with different energy sector. For example, I mean, just giving you one example, that concessional financing scheme has generally been deemed suitable with all of these sectors other than the climate risk reduction and the biodiversity. And this is where we have actually identified. This document will be available to you after the meeting, so you can have a look at this as well. But we sort of tried to map which financing instruments are suitable for energy transition and under which sort of activities. We are still in the process of further developing it under different partnerships models and else as well. When we actually talk about the challenges which the private sector has actually seen in mobilizing its finance, I think Dr. Sajid has highlighted a couple very clearly. That is one of the regulation, the uncertainty, may it be economic or political, as well as regulatory. That has been actually one of the key pillars or key pointers that have actually hindered the growth of the investments of the private sector in this overall domain of clean energy transition as well. Limited grid integration, definitely grid has been one of the challenges. Pakistan has mainly attracted the finance in its generation system, while the investments of the private sector in the transmission distribution have remained very limited. There have been few cases, but yeah, as compared to the investment that have gone into the generation side, that has been very challenging. Then we actually talked about some of the project development delays. That has been actually one of the key things. Energy markets, they're still not yet fully established, and technological growth has remained limited as well. The distribution generation has a lot of potential in Pakistan, but again, as of the household levels, this has attracted a lot of financing, and in fact, the solar growth or the solar, and again, which we actually have, has actually seen some good experience over the key days as well. So I think again, just very quickly highlighting when we talk about EVs, we found out that the lack of ownership and changing regulatory support, that has been one of the challenges. Still has been no compliance or absence of the desired standards that are present in Pakistan for which the market can actually come up and invest. There's a very wide disconnect between different stakeholders, between the private and the federal entities as well. And the high capital cost and lack of financing models has again been one of the key challenges here. So I think as for the recommendations, we'll shortly be touching them later as we go into the discussion, because this is where we are really looking into more to listening from your end. So with this was a bit of some of the key findings, but once we have this all report based upon today's discussion and all that, we'll be finally forwarding you the complete report if anyone wants to review and add to it. The presentation can be made available just after the meeting. So with this, I'll be handing it over, and we'll be starting the first panel on the role of financing institution. And firstly, I'll be handing it over to Zainab Naeem. So yeah, Zainab, this was all from my end. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ubaid. And once again, good morning, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of STPI's Network on Clean Energy Transition, I once again welcome you all, and thank you so much for joining us for this very important debate that we are having through this Green Financing Summit. So for the first session, I'll be the moderator. So that's titled Enabling Clean Energy Transition in Pakistan, the Role of Financing Institutions. As Ubaid has very pertinently highlighted in his presentation, that financing institutions and mobilizing private sector finance for transitioning towards clean energy is the key, especially for countries like Pakistan, because even at COP28, though we have had this text in the main document, transitioning away from fossil fuels, yet I believe every country, whether it's developing country or whether it's the most vulnerable country in the world, needs to mobilize its own indigenous local finance as well. So for this, we are really thankful to all of you for joining us today. I'll just briefly introduce the panel. So we have been joined by Mr. Umar Khan, Head of Investment Banking, SEVP Bank of Punjab, Ms. Paula Shaukat, Head of Strategy and Sustainability, Mobiling Microfinance Bank Limited, Mr. Mehboob Alam Khan, Head of MV Engineering, Sustainability and HSE Mizan Bank Limited, Dr. Majid Bilal Khan, Manager of Just Energy Transition Indus Consortium. And as panel chair, we are really honored to have been joined by Mr. Faisal Shafat, Additional Director, SME Housing and Sustainable Finance Department, State Bank of Pakistan. So thank you once again. I'll just start with, and I'll also be requesting Dr. Khalid Waleed in the end, Research Fellow STPI, to sum it all up and just give a gist of what has been discussed. So my first question will be from Mr. Umar Khan, Head of Investment Banking, SEVP Bank of Punjab. So, Umar, if you can kindly share your perspective around, given the current high inflation environment and elevated policy rates, how should or how are we the commercial banking actually playing their role to attract hesitant renewable energy investors and ensuring these projects remain financially viable and attractive? And you can discuss the perspective generally and as well as share what is your organization's point of view in this regard. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Zainab. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all of you once again. And thank you for the opportunity. I think it's the timing is very opportune. The topic is very relevant to what we are facing here in Pakistan. Again, I think as some of your colleagues have rightly mentioned, Dr. Sajid has set the stage very nicely. And in fact, if I may say so, the problems appear to be overwhelming at the very least. But at the same time, I think it's also very important not to get bogged down by the sheer quantum and magnitude of the problems. And insofar as I, representing commercial banks, are concerned, there are several interventions that we think, again, maybe at a very specific level, and the problems be as they may, but I think it's important to start addressing them one by one. So without further ado, and not too much on the problems, there are a few things which I believe we as domestic commercial banks can do, and also how to sort of tap into this large pool that Ubaid also very rightly talked about of foreign funding. So let me just put some context around here. I think the kind of numbers, Ubaid, that you're talking about, the numbers are right, but it's also very important to understand that the funding is going to come in either in the form of debt capital or in the form of equity capital. And again, we have representatives. In fact, the chair is from the State Bank. We also have to be very cognizant that the kind of money that is coming in, it's not a one-way street. That money needs to flow out also, whether in the form of repayment of those loans, if they are coming in as long-term loans. I'm talking about foreign currency funding. And let's say if that money is coming in the form of equity investment, then dividends need to flow out also. So it's going to be a tightrope act, that we as a country, as an economy, and State Bank as the custodian of foreign currency needs to walk on. So I just wanted to put some context around, how that funding is going to come in, and more importantly, how it's going to flow out also, because both from a foreign currency lender's perspective and from a foreign currency investor perspective, this is probably the single largest consideration, especially in the wake of what we have been experiencing as a country during the last few years of credit crunch. Insofar as, okay, now in terms of the quantum of funding that is available, what I can say confidently, having worked in the industry for over 2 decades, is that there is generally no shortage of funding insofar as renewable energy is concerned, whether we are talking about domestic commercial banks or we are talking about foreign DFIs. In fact, a lot of the foreign DFIs have been very active in Pakistan, which frankly, we don't give ourselves credit enough for the good things that are happening. I think that kind of investment, especially from foreign investors and foreign DFIs, is a testament to the quality of the power sector policies that have been in vogue in Pakistan for the last 20 years. We have seen investment across the spectrum, across technologies, whatever the flavor of that particular year or decade may be, but we have had investments from from foreign parties, both on the equity and debt side, and especially when it comes to renewable energy, there is generally no shortage. Having said this, it's also very important to make sure that we present the right framework to them, and especially some of the issues that we have been facing, primarily with respect to foreign debt funding. Those issues need to be alleviated. Again, I'm trying to avoid putting more problems on the table, but we are all aware of the issues of circular debt, and foreign investors and foreign lenders very carefully look at these things. If their dividend repatriation is being slowed out, that is one area that they very keenly look at. And not just them. In fact, the future investment is largely dependent on such parameters. Again, insofar as local domestic banks are concerned, and again, in the context of the very high interest rate environment that we are facing. So obviously it is what it is. But what we as domestic commercial banks can do is, and I think this has been a long-standing demand of primarily local currency investors also. Investors basically need certainty of cash flows. And the big variability in terms of CIBOR rates in the interest rates, that needs to be somehow addressed. For that, what I'm going to suggest is, again, this is nothing new, but the beauty is in implementing it. It's to have long-term fixed rate lending products. Again, this is a product that is available, but many local banks actually do not venture into it. I think it will give the kind of certainty of cash outflows that investors are looking at. I think it's so that is one area that local commercial banks need to focus more on, especially when it comes to the future rounds of renewable energy that we are seeing in primarily in solar and also in hybrid models. The second big pot, we all have heard that there are large amounts of foreign funding available, and that is true. We have got the likes of Green Climate Fund, we have got just energy transition mechanisms, energy transition partnerships. These are all good mechanisms. And in fact, in one of the similar, related sessions earlier on, also we gave certain recommendations. It is important to understand how to tap into them, because these mechanisms and these pots of cash actually come with their own sets of challenges. First and foremost, they are generally time consuming. So they're not quick fixes. The processes involved at their end, the kind of due diligence requirements that they impose on projects and these initiatives take a reasonably large quantum of time. We all need to be mindful of that, and our timelines for implementation have to be according. But nevertheless, I think it's important to understand that. So commercial banks, we need local commercial banks have a degree of onus to take care. I think because we are well placed, we are on the ground, we have got established relationship with large leading corporates and existing developers of renewable energy projects, so we know them well. For somebody coming into Pakistan for investment, right off the bat, they need to have that confidence translated to them. So I think that is where local commercial banks can act as a conduit, and there are several mechanisms which can be put at play. For example, we and a couple of other commercial banks are working with international DFIs to actually borrow foreign currency from them and then on-lend this foreign currency to qualifying projects. What is the benefit of this mechanism? So, somebody can potentially argue that these DFIs can directly lend into these projects, which is true. But again, all hands need to be on deck. So they can. So those DFIs which are present in Pakistan, they can absolutely directly venture into lending into projects directly. But there are several pots of funding for foreign currency which are not present on the ground. And for them, Pakistan is a relatively unknown commodity in that sense. So from an FI to FI, from a financial institution to another financial institution, we can sort of translate and share that confidence with them, explain to them in terms that they understand, the kind of framework that is at play, what has been our experience as lenders, what has been our own portfolio performance. So this gives a lot of confidence to international DFIs, and especially if they're not present on ground. So one intervention that we are talking about is basically on lending of concessionary funding instruments. Again, some of this funding is actually available pretty cheap compared to if Pakistan is to venture into international capital markets, because of the environment, the conditions, and our country rating. The kind of funding that Pakistan will otherwise get in international capital markets is going to be pretty steep. But some of this funding for environment actually is a concessionary funding, so we can take benefit of it, which can then translate into lower tariffs, for the end consumers. Another specific intervention, if I can share, is in terms of tenor profiles. So again, in Pakistan, investment in power sector has happened primarily over a tenor of 10 to 12 years. But I think, again, because we raise Pakistani rupee deposits, so at least the large local commercial banks can extend this tenor profile, because one of the very important factors which is going to impact the end tariff level for the end consumer is primarily determined by the tenor of this long-term debt, because these projects are heavily leveraged, as most of us understand. So if they are done at 70-30 or 80-20 debt to equity, lengthening the tenor will have the single largest impact in terms of the tariff on the end consumer. So again, this is one area where local commercial banks can play that role, and we can extend these tenors to, let's say, 15, 17, maybe up to 20 years also. And I think it's especially important because now on the energy side, on the renewables, we are looking at comparative bidding models, whether it is to the grid or whether it is comparative bidding to K-Electric. I think it's a very good initiative which will result in substantial tariff reductions for the end consumer. It was also talked about, what can we do in terms of innovating green financing products. So some of the things that I've spoken about are pretty common in the sense that, local commercial banks just need to put their act together. But in terms of newer interventions and newer products, I would say green bonds is our capital markets, unfortunately, in Pakistan do not have not shouldered the burden of this financing. Whereas if you look at elsewhere in the world, capital markets, especially when it comes to infrastructure financing, are a very, very important source of capital raising. So I think our domestic capital market participants need to step up to the plate. And I think we need to explore more properly green bonds, and especially if we can also, somehow look at some green bonds, with an Islamic angle to them also, because Islamic banks and Islamic-oriented, non-bank financial institutions, this is one area where they need to sort of work together and put up their end of the bargain. So in our assessment, a blend of a sponsor equity and green bonds, it will help reduce the upfront equity commitment expenses, especially for renewable energy projects.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Umar Khan, for a very comprehensive analysis around not just the challenges, but also the opportunities that we can avail. And regarding the circular debt issue, I think, yeah, that's something that investors do look at very critically, and Pakistan needs to put its own house in order first in order to invite more investments. But yes, regarding green bonds, I think that's again there's a very broad window for green bonds, and if FIs and MFIs are exploring this opportunity, especially for securing more finance, I think it can have a very great potential for Pakistanis. So thank you so much for the intervention. I believe you have to leave for another meeting, but I do look forward if you stay for to ask another question from you. So thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to have you for this summit. My next question is to Miss. It's directed towards Miss Paula Shoaib. Apologies, I pronounced the name incorrectly. So she's the head of strategy and sustainability, Mobilink Microfinance Bank Limited. So Paula, my question is regarding, given Pakistan's current unique socioeconomic landscape, how does a microfinance bank assess and mitigate the risk associated with financing clean energy projects, especially in rural and remote areas? Also, if you can elaborate on the specific financial instruments or products your institution offers to support clean energy initiatives, and how do you ensure their accessibility to marginalized communities? So that's two questions summed up in one. Over to you.
Thank you, Zainab, for the question. So financing clean energy in rural areas of Pakistan indeed presents unique challenges. But let's break down the question. So let's first talk about the risk, right? There's market uncertainty. Energy demand can be quite unpredictable. Then there are awareness issues. As you know, rural communities aren't really familiar with how to operate and maintain clean energy systems. The third one is climate disasters. The likelihood of a natural disaster occurring and infrastructure getting damaged in rural areas is obviously always higher as compared to urban areas. So how do MFIs tackle these risks? So the first and foremost is risk management. We do a comprehensive risk assessment exercise, and we conduct thorough compliance checks and risk ratings to understand the potential challenges. Number two, there's collaterals and guarantees involved, so you need to set aside appropriate collateral requirements or get guarantees from borrowers to secure financing. Number three, obviously, is awareness campaigns. We need to educate communities on maintaining and using clean energy systems, which is crucial for the success of these projects, right? And lastly, I would also like to touch upon offering insurance products and partnering with other organizations to mitigate risks related to equipment failure, natural disasters, and revenue shortfalls. So now coming specifically to some of the financial products that MMBL, Mobilink Bank, offers for clean energy. So we have been providing solar financing for the last 3 to 5 years. We provide solar financing through various collateral-backed lending products such as house loans, agri loans, gold loans, and school loans. These loans then help our customers install solar systems on their homes, farms, and businesses, right? For 2024, we've taken an ambitious target to reach 2.5 billion PKR in solar financing. Your last part of the question was, how do we ensure that these products reach marginalized community? So from our perspective, We have a nationwide network of 109 branches, and we do rigorous staff training exercises. So our field staff is well informed to inform customers about our clean energy loans. Then we also do financial literacy training programs through our Women Inspirational Network program, where we basically provide financial literacy to our female customers, educating them on the benefits and uses of clean energy loans. Lastly, and I think this is really important, we also undertake climate resilience partnerships, where we partner with organizations on climate resilience initiatives, helping our clients adopt practices that enhance their resilience to climate changes while also utilizing clean energy efficiently. Now, we've seen success stories from our own clientele where farmers have used our solar financing to install solar-powered water pumps, which significantly reduces their energy costs and increases their productivity also. Lastly, I just want to let you all know that Mobilink Bank is continuously exploring newer ways to innovate and support clean energy projects that not only benefit our clients, but then they also contribute to the overall development of rural and remote areas of Pakistan. Thank you, Zainab.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paula, for highlighting the initiatives that MMBL is taking. And also, you very pertinently pointed out key initiatives that are linked with climate resilience and climate risk insurance. So I think role of microfinance is extremely important, keeping in view the current impact of disasters that we are having in the country. So thank you so much for your intervention. I'll be getting back to you for key recommendations after the next panelist. So the next panelist that I'll be taking is Dr. Majid Bilal Khan, Manager of Just Energy Transition Indus Consortium. So Dr. Majid, from a CSO's perspective, and the work that Indus Consortium has done, how do you see commercial banks and the central bank should play its role in energy transition of Pakistan? And what are the key challenges that you think are actually existing from your point of view? So over to you, Dr. Majid, if you can also switch on your camera.
Thank you, Zainab. If I switch on my camera, you will not be able to hear me. We've got terrible internet, so I'll just keep it off for now, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Coming back to your question, Zainab, even though it's already been briefly highlighted, I'll quickly go through the ground scenarios that we face in Pakistan. We face problems due to climate change. Energy transition globally is driven by climate change. What drives climate change is CO2 emissions. CO2 emissions are driven by combustion, and globally, nearly 90% of all CO2 emissions are due to combustion of coal, oil, and gas. That is one of the realities we face on the ground. The second reality is you cannot do anything in the world without money or without financing. That is where this discussion comes in. Now, I'll briefly highlight what we have done in this regard within this, and move forward from there. So firstly, in the recent past, Indus has engaged with State Bank of Pakistan in particular on the implementation of green banking guidelines. For this, we did prepare a study where we did get collaboration from officials, again from State Bank, Bank Al-Habib and Habib Bank, and they were instrumental in us preparing the study. Secondly, what we've done a lot of work on has been engagement with domestic commercial banks in Pakistan on State Bank's FSRE scheme, that is financial scheme for renewable energy. And in this regard, we did do extensive study work. And one good example of or success story of this was Bank Al-Habib, who did invest about 41 billion within the first 5 years of this scheme being there. And currently what we are working on is engagement with domestic banks on ESRM implementation. That is more or less the crux of what we are doing. And now, if I have to highlight the problems or the challenges faced by CSOs in general and Indus in particular, I would possibly put it along these lines. Number one, due to the economic crisis that Pakistan faced, the FSRE scheme has not necessarily been very successful overall, because due to FSRE scheme, the State Bank was supposed to give financing on 6% concessional refinancing. This has more or less stopped, and since 2022, the refinancing from State Bank has been negligible. And due to this, the financing from commercial banks in Pakistan has gone up to roughly 20%. And this does act as a deterrent to the promotion of energy transition. I believe the biggest challenge we faced in our work was data tracking. We found that there is no publicly available data on how much financing through FSRE scheme has been done. We did not find it available, easily available from the banks, or we did not find it available on the State Bank website as well. Yes, there might be a mechanism where the banks report to the State Bank, and that data might be there, but it's not available to CSOs or publicly available. Why do we need this data? We need it to analyze how many projects facilitated by FSRE scheme under its three different categories have successfully been implemented, and then we can give a better suggestion on a way forward. And taking into account current work that is regarding ESRM implementation, what we have found is that yes, it was a voluntary scheme, but the banks have been able to pick and choose different parts of the scheme in their implementation. And to track their compliance measures, we need it to be implemented across the board. And whatever the banks are implementing, it has to be presented to the CSOs in general and the public in general. This again comes back to data transparency that we really think is a part that is missing, and we would like some work done on this. That is briefly me going over what we've done and way forward. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Majid. And yes, I think some of the challenges have been very precisely covered, and while some of the challenges are coming up from the perspective of a CSO, yes, they do exist, and I believe through consensus and collaboration, those challenges can be addressed. So thank you so much. My next panelist is Mr. Mehboob Alam Khan from Mizan Bank Limited. So Mr. Mehboob Alam Khan, sir, I'll take a question that our participants are also asking. So regarding the green finance regulatory policy, if you can comment on that, and also how do you see the collaboration between FIs and MFIs for overall ensuring green transition in Pakistan? So it's going to be a general comment, but also if you can highlight Mizan Bank's initiatives in this perspective, keeping in view the current financing scenario. Over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I hope you people hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right. Acha ji. This is one of the important areas which we are discussing today, and the role of banks in doing this energy transition. As the title says, that enabling the clean energy transition, which is very, very important these days. So why it is important? Because of the environment factor as well. First of all, we want to see how energy we are generating. That there are different methods we are generating energy, generating power in Pakistan. The common one is through thermal, using gas and crude oil. So in order to have a clean energy transition, we have to shift the paradigm towards clean energy, and clean energy sources are solar, wind, and hydro. All right. So what banks are doing, what policies are going, and what Mizan Bank is doing. First of all, I want to let the forum know a few of the initiative that Mizan Bank took. Mizan Bank took it very seriously, this clean energy concept, and we supported. We have different initiatives during 2023, which are also which can also be viewed through our annual report, in which we have financed to 5 megawatt plus residential consumers to switch to solar energy. Then we have a commercial segment also, that is also a very huge, that is 458 million PKR are dispersed in terms of loan to commercial solar financing. Then we also finance to the large corporate sectors, in which we finance hydel and wind projects. So every bank is playing their role. And what Umar Saab have said, from according to for funding available options and the role of domestic banks, I really agree with him. As well as what Majid Bilal Saab have said on subsidized financing. So now what we want to see is what is the need. We need support from the management of Pakistan. All right, the policy support we need. What we have a very clear policy, green banking policy from the State Bank, which is basically the driving force which will be the driving force, and which is currently the driving force of clean energy transition. But the issues are, there are certain areas which need to be highlighted. One of them is subsidized financing, which should be available, which is currently not available. Tax exemptions, which should be given on all those products that helps in renewable energy generation. Then exemption of duties in the import of those items, because in Pakistan we don't actually manufacture the products which are used to generate renewable energy. We almost 90% of the equipment are imported. So the relief in terms of import duties, reliefs in terms of opening of LCs, this kind of support is the first end which is being needed in order to promote clean energy transition in Pakistan. I hope every bank, every financial institute is playing their part and adhering to the policy from the State Bank. But end consumer needs further support from the policy makers on tax exemptions, on relaxation of import duties, on easiness of LC openings, even net metering infrastructure. We need to think on what kind of options we have. Like one of the biggest segment currently in market, which is willing to do the energy transitions. We are having banks are having their products in terms of financing for residential consumer are solar panel financing. But the problem is in net metering infrastructure. Net metering infrastructure should be relooked, should be more incentivized in terms of current rates, whatever the power purchase rates are available in the market. So these are the key areas. These areas will help in increase in number of consumers switching towards renewable energy. This will definitely increase in the options of renewable energy financing. And this is from my side. I think I have elaborated a bit well. Furthermore, just one point I also want to elaborate here, which is because it also comes under the clean energy transition. And particularly talking about banks and what Mizan Bank have already did, you can see the banks are operating across Pakistan. So they have like branches across Pakistan. So banks can also play a role in reducing their own carbon footprint. Every bank has their own very huge carbon footprint in terms of operation, daily operations, electricity. I mean, how they are generating electricity, to switching to renewable energy resources by their own. And this could also be promoted through awareness sessions to different customers. Mizan Bank is doing. Mizan Bank is have adopted a strategy to convert to switch to solar energy and other forms of energy efficiency improvement, and we are also creating awareness among the market to different consumers. We are collaborating with different educational institute to create the awareness of the importance of clean green energy, and also we are collaborating with different multilateral UN system organizations. Those are working in promoting green energy transitions. So we are taking it as a national noble cause, and the other banks can also take in the same way, and I hope they are doing the same work. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mehboob Alam Khan. So before requesting the panel chair, I'm just going to ask Umar Khan Saab for one key takeaway for the session, and then we can move towards the panel chair. I hope Faisal Saab that will be okay for you. So just one key takeaway from Mr. Umar Khan Saab, and then I'll be requesting the panel chair for his remarks. Over to you, Umar Khan Saab.
Thank you very much, Zainab, once again. I think fantastic suggestions from all of my colleagues who have spoken after me and before me also. In terms of what else can be done, also specifically the role of central bank, and I think I spoke earlier also that we as commercial banks tend to respond very well to directions of the central bank. Whether it's good or bad is a subject of another debate. But I think in the case of certain previous initiatives also, banks responded well to some sort of encouragement or nudge from the central bank. I am not necessarily talking about having mandatory targets for renewable energy, although that can be an option also. But it can be a set of incentives also. For example, if the central bank wants to encourage or nudge banks towards having a greater share of renewable energy projects in their portfolio, there can be certain incentives such as lower risk weights in terms of when calculating their risk weight assets, because that is one incentive that banks would encourage the banks to move towards this area. And I think another important aspect, if I can mention again, and just my last suggestion, is that we need to invest more heavily and seriously in terms of made in Pakistan. We all spoke about the solar revolution, but I think as I mentioned right up front when I began to share my views, I said we have to tread this very carefully, because whatever investment is going to come in needs to flow out also, right? And a large part of solar intervention is going to come in the form of the cost of solar plates and investors. So some sort of technology transfer. It can be a gradual process, let's say over the next 3 to 5 years, with the help and support of our partners and friends in China. I think if we begin to develop local fabrication of solar panels and start gradually assembly of inverters, I think that is going to go a long way in terms of reducing our dependence on foreign currency. And I think it's going to be a much needed intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So now the panel chair, and for Paula and Mehboob Alam Saab, you have to stay with us, because after him, I'll be coming towards you for the key takeaways. So Faisal Shafat Saab, thank you so much for joining. Your reflections on the panel discussion, that's what we require from you. And apart from that, given the high policy rates due to ongoing economic turmoil, what could be the possible pathways for attracting investments in renewable or clean energy space? So you have already put your hand on your forehead. I can see that, but of course, I mean, there might be something that the State Bank must be thinking, of course, to ease certain challenges for the banks. So over to you, please.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to all the learned panelists and the distinguished guests. I really appreciate the views of the panelists that have been shared in this summit. What I would like to share with you the importance of this important topic, because the best business case for the renewable energy is that it is much cheaper than the fossil fuels. And for Pakistan, the renewable energy offers more than just cost and the environmental benefits. As you know that it not only provides energy security, but also it also provides savings in terms of the foreign exchange as well. So as far as the steps that have been taken by State Bank of Pakistan so far have been highlighted by a few panelists, such as the Green Banking Guidelines and the ESRM manual. And being the central bank, we are very closely monitoring the implementation of those Green Banking Guidelines. And I'm very happy to share with you that the progress is quite satisfactory in terms of the implementation of the Green Banking Guidelines, as well as the ESRM manual implementation. Further, another important step that central bank has taken is the development of the national green taxonomy. And for this, we have established a working group consisting of around 16 working group members. Ministry of Climate Change is co-chairing it. And once the taxonomy is developed, it would be taken as a reference point for the investors and as well as for the financial institutions to develop specific sectoral products to promote the environmental friendly practices for efficient and renewable energy. Then I would also highlight, although number of initiatives have been highlighted by the panelists that can be taken with regard to the promotion of the renewable energy financing, but there are some other things that can be done by the financial institutions. For example, if we talk about a bank that is named as Siam Commercial Bank, which is a Thai bank. So they have earmarked, say, around 6 billion baht to support energy saving and other sustainability projects. Same kind of practices our financial institutions can also adopt. Another important aspect would be the role of the fintechs or the digital banks that can play in this particular respect. Again, I would like to quote an international example here. There is a fintech, you must have heard about M-Kopas in Kenya. I mean, what they are doing, they are basically harnessing the mobile money transaction data to allow the qualifying borrowers to lease and eventually own their own solar panels to power their shops. So such sort of practices can also be adopted here in Pakistan as well, while providing to provide the renewable energy financing. One of the panelists also highlighting about also inquiring about the progress of the renewable energy scheme of Pakistan. So I would like to share the data here. So by December 2023, the total amount which was outstanding is about 94 billion rupees. And there are more than 3,160 projects that have been financed through this amount. And the capacity that has been generated is about 1,830 megawatts. So this is the response to the query that have been. So What banks can do, I think there is a need to develop innovative products by the banks, by the financial institutions, as highlighted by Umar as well, that the tenor of the loans for the renewable energy projects can be lengthened. So this is one of the way. Another way could be the banks can offer a certain grace period for the principal amount for such projects. This can be done. And another encouraging thing is that, as you know, the renewable energy scheme is about to close by 30th June 2024 on account of the fact that we have IMF constraints. There are IMF conditionalities due to which we cannot extend or issue another scheme in this respect for the time being. So the banks already, it is quite encouraging that banks are financing the renewable energy projects on commercial rates as well. Further, there are some other instruments that can be utilized for the promotion of the renewable energy, such as green bonds. Green bond is already, SCCP has already issued the guidelines in this respect. WABDA has already issued $500 million in green bond, named as Indus Bond, I think so. Then there's also a need to partner investors as well as the financial institutions. The equity and the debt should be. And one good example is the Qaid-e-Azam Solar project, where Bank of Punjab, I think so, have 100% financed. And there was an equity partner, foreign equity partner, which was who has invested in the form of the equity in the project. So in this way, we can promote such products as well. And as far as your question is concerned with regard to the high policy interest rates, so this policy interest rate, we hope that it will not be remain forever. There would be they will go down, and as you know that nowadays the loans are given on a variable rates. So even the project is financed for now, since these are the longer term projects. Over the years, the policy rate will come down, and the financing can be done. So in this way, the financial institutions can pursue such projects as well by convincing their borrowers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Faisal sir. But before, just taking the liberty of having you with us today. So,
yes.
Being STPI, I have a question from you, and then there's a question from Farhan Rana from IRENA. So my question is, how do you see the role of STPI influencing or supporting the agenda that SVP is having? Because we'll be coming to you probably sooner or later for having this kind of discussion. So how do you see the role of STPI or think tanks like STPI in this overall, domain of green finance? And apart from that, the question from Mr. Farhan Rana from IRENA is, can State Bank play a larger role in influencing lending and banking practices to favor clean energy financing? Are there any areas within the green banking guidelines that need to be addressed?
So Zainab, I think one thing that STPI is doing is quite appreciable, and that is the conducting such summits and seminars. It really opens up the ideas. It really provide awareness among the masses as well, or the among different stakeholders in this regard. I think that is a great job that STPI is doing. Having said that, the banking is one side. You see, I think there is also a need to develop capital market in this respect as well, such as these green bonds. I mean, these are very important. Nature to debt swap can be another option that can be adopted. Similarly, there is a need to develop the markets for the carbon credits. The mechanism needs to be developed. And overall, there is also an issue that is the governance issue as well with regard to the initiatives that have been taken up or that are taking place. I mean, there are a number of different organizations in Pakistan who are taking these initiatives, but there is not a much collaborative effort. Like Ministry of Finance is taking its own initiatives, Ministry of Climate Change is taking its own initiative, Central Bank is, taking its own initiative. So there is a need to find a common ground to achieve these objectives.
Thank you so much, Faisal Saab. So thank you for highlighting the role of SBP, and thank you for explaining how the work that is being done in silos, that's also great work, but collaboration should be the key to addressing these challenges, and also for addressing a critical question around policy rates. So yes, that's not going to stay with us forever. I hope so. But as of now, it's a challenge for everyone. So thank you so much. Now, Paula, over to you. One key recommendation from your side to address this green financing challenges. So over to you.
Thank you, Zainab. I would like to echo the thoughts shared by my fellow panelists and the chair. Despite these challenges, there have been positive developments. Pakistan has gained attention for climate financing. So in my opinion, I think the role of public-private partnerships is particularly important to drive this agenda. PPPs can identify the most impactful and viable sectors to target for green energy lending, and then jointly identify the right strategies to achieve our national renewable energy goals. Another thing that I would like to point out is, in comparison to commercial banks, microfinance banks have fewer financial resources and regulatory restrictions on financing limits. So perhaps this can also be reevaluated jointly with the State Bank, particularly for green financing initiatives. That's about it from my side.
Thank you, Paula. So Mr. Mehboob Alam Khan, your one key recommendation for today's session?
As we all discussed, we should take that the clean energy transition, the clean energy as a holistic picture and as a national cause, and to promote renewable energy at all levels. Like in terms of banking finance, we take it as consumer level, commercial level, and corporate level. For that, what we need is we need to come up with more supportive, reliable products, as well as we need support from the government level, from the policy level. How we can do that? The first step is to support the local manufacturing facilities, to set up local manufacturing facilities. If we have a local manufacturing facility set up here for like solar panel manufacturing, inverters, batteries, and other energy efficiency products. Like if we see 25 years ago, we used incandescent bulbs. Then we switched to the more efficient way of lighting, and then now we are using LED lights. So this is what we need is to have locally manufactured products. In order to set up those setups, we need support from the banks. We need support from the government level to have to incentivize them. So from my side, the key area is that and I agree with Ms. Paula, that public-private partnerships should be developed, and the government should also pitch in to support local manufacturing of all those products that can play their part towards clean energy. That's from my side.
Thank you so much. So before I request Dr. Khalid Waleed for the concluding remarks, I think we can take one or two questions from the participants. So I think Mr. Shafkat Hussain Memon, your question was already taken live and it was also addressed. So Mr. Numan Khalid is suggesting IT automation for ESG and SDG reporting. And there was another question that why all FIs don't make their sustainability reports public. So I think maybe if anyone of the panelists would like to comment on these questions that are being raised, and are there any more financing schemes planned by SBP? I think Mr. Faisal Shafat has already highlighted a few of them that are ongoing, and definitely if there are any more, we can certainly SBP can share that. So yes, if anyone, any of the panelists would like to comment on regarding IT automation for ESG and SDG reporting, and how disclosures reporting is important, and why some of the banks are not making their reports public. Yes. So anyone will.
Assalamu alaikum, Zainab. I think I have already responded in text to this question on why the banks are not issuing sustainability reports. So if you still want me to address it, I'm happy to do it. Answer it in text if you can see it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think otherwise we have suggestions. So I'll now request Dr. Khalid Waleed for the concluding remarks. Over to you, Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid, if you can also switch on your camera.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zainab, and thank you so much, esteemed panelists and very learned and insightful participants. It has been a really fascinating sort of debate when it comes towards the financial policies or monetary policy, or role of the financial institutions. Just to set context, or as everybody has highlighted the importance of energy financing, renewable energy financing, climate financing here. Let me just add it by adding the fixed objective of COP29, which is going to be happened in Baku this year. And that fixed objective is relying upon linking climate ambition with climate action, and how this linking would be possible. That would be through financing mechanisms, how we can alter the global financial architecture in favor of renewable energy financing and climate financing. So this is the significant question that we need to answer, that everybody needs to answer, particularly working under economy, energy, or environment. So this is a nexus we need to address. Taking lead from points added by Dr. Sajid in opening remarks, that these policies, energy transition, climate financing, adaptation, mitigation, they are now pretty much the part of macroeconomic policy making all over the globe, not just for the developing countries or global south. If you see the concluding statement coming from the spring meetings of World Bank and IMF, you'll see that the development agenda now incorporates climate and development. It is not or anymore. It is and climate and development. So development is pretty much linked with climate now. What I would like to add, but I would like to first echo the points and endorse all those points that have been discussed by our esteemed panelists. One or two things already been discussed, but again, from my point of view, I would like to discuss them as a foundation sort of thing. First thing, maybe a financial mechanism that would get help from the policy that can be developed under this carbon pricing policy. If there is a pricing for carbon, that would be helpful for the banking system to prioritize their loans or borrowing sort of things. They can add a price to those loans as well. Second thing, maybe the financial system or banking institutions, they need to add some sort of a positive screening at this particular time. All the financing that has been being done for the renewable for the energy transition or renewable energy financing, that is being done on the principle of negative screening. That is how we can de-risk, how we can sort of eliminate the risk, and how the returns will be ensured. Maybe positive screening can be added. Positive screening essentially mean that banks, while providing loans, they would be prioritizing those projects who are beneficial or have positive impact on environment. In that way, there would be a distinction between projects that are harmful for the environment and they have positive impacts that might be beneficial for Pakistan at this current point of time where interest rates are high, inflation is high. Secondly, I would echo the point made by Faisal Saab that Pakistan needs to bring synergies. Every institution is working in silo. We need to break these silos, particularly in terms of RE financing. Monetary policy should be supported by fiscal policy, and fiscal policy should be supported by monetary policy. Just an example, USA, they had inflation rate rising up. They had energy pricing rising up. What they did, they introduced an act known as Inflation Reduction Act. In wording, in title, it is targeting inflation, it is reducing inflation, but how it is reducing inflation? Through giving tax credit, subsidies, tax grants to renewable energy sector so that people can sort of invest in renewable energy practices, sustainability practices, and that will in turn bring the inflation down. So it is an integrating sort of thing in which one policy can favor complement other policy, and in that way the aggregate welfare, either that would be in monetary terms or either that would be in fiscal terms, that would be aggregated. Third thing, maybe the role of capital markets that has also been discussed. Maybe green ratings and green stock indices that could be introduced as well in Pakistan, particularly catering to environmental risk, polluting project, and their increasing cost, and that could sort of bring this revolution or a green revolution in our capital market. Lastly, in this financial instrument sort of things, maybe SDPI can foster with the help of State Bank of Pakistan and Bank of Punjab and other banking institutions. What we can do is we can sort of gather all these green investors together, form a green investing network sort of thing, where we can sort of discuss expertise, capabilities, and broader ambit of or contours of green financial policy for Pakistan and how it can sort of promote green industries in Pakistan, because at the end it would be industrial growth happening in Pakistan that would sort of reduce these financial risks in terms of interest rate, in terms of exchange rate fluctuations. That would be a long-term, persistent sort of thing that Pakistan can achieve. Lastly, 2 points. Maybe securities should be discussed in terms of green equities, green mutual funds, how securitization can be done in terms of collateral and so sort of things. Lastly, in terms of maybe we need to add insurance sort of mechanism for these renewable energy projects. What should be climate risk insurance, and how we can sort of expand the scope of green insurance in Pakistan. Because right now, if you see the wind sector, they see this risk of curtailment because of transmission constraint in Pakistan. So that need to be coupled with some sort of initiative, some sort of fiscal risk reduction or de-risking sort of mechanisms. Lastly, 1 or 2 points already highlighted, that environmental pollution liability insurance systems that might be helpful for Pakistan in terms of institutions reporting and developing more robust sort of databases in which sort of tracking mechanism can be developed. So these would be holistic sort of way, maybe whole of a government or whole of a sector sort of approach, where one policy, either it is a fiscal policy or monetary policy, it is helping achieving the long-term goal of environmental sort of obligation on Pakistan. That would not only be helpful for Pakistan in terms of climate commitments, but also in addressing the macroeconomic challenges that Pakistan faces. With this, thank you so much for this insightful discussion. I'm damn sure that SDPI would be taking lead on developing this network of green investors, particularly greening our financial institutions and learning from their best practices. So thank you so much, Zainab, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for summing this all up and for sharing the way forward as well, and how STPI is keen to work with all the stakeholders. And I think the idea around network is very, very important. Also, if State Bank can take the lead along with STPI, we'll be very happy to support the central bank and also the other private sector banks. We are always here to provide any kind of support, whether it's in the form of research, data collection, collaboration among the stakeholders, or anything that aligns with the national agenda. So thank you so much once again. And with this, the first session comes to an end. I hope it's been really engaging, at least for the participants who are here on Zoom, but also I see a good response on our social media as well. The session has been recorded, and the recorded link will also be shared with everyone who's missed any point. They can get that from the recording. And so the next session we are going to take a 5 to 7 minutes break. And the next session will be on stock taking of alternate financing mechanisms to support energy transition in Pakistan. That will be moderated by Ubaid. So before the next session starts, just 5 to 7 minutes break, and then we'll be starting. So thank you once again, and have a good day.
Hello, Dr. Christoph, Sasab, Faiza, Dr. Khalid, Durraiz.
Hello.
How are you, Ji?
Good to see everyone.
Good to see you. Hello. Hi, Zona. How's everyone, Ji?
Hello, everyone. How are you?
And
Dr.
Dr. Khalid.
Christoph. Hello. Dure, how are you? Ms. Faiza.
Hello. I hope everyone's well.
Yeah, good. Asad Saab, always a pleasure.
Yeah, hello. Yes, likewise. Hello, everyone. Good
Dona,
morning, good afternoon, your timings.
So yeah, I think people are coming back, but perhaps you can just start with the round of introduction. So once again, thank you so much everyone for joining us back in the second session of this Green Financing Summit on driving the energy transition through the alternate and green financing mechanisms. So the second session is actually dedicated towards the stock taking of alternate financing mechanisms that can support the clean energy transition in Pakistan. So now, as we're going towards this session, let me just very quickly not wrap up, but perhaps identify what we have actually been discussing in the last session. We actually had the participation from the different commercial banks of Pakistan, the Pakistan Central Bank, that is the State Bank of Pakistan. We also had participation from civil society organizations too. And the whole idea was that in the overall economic and political challenge that we're actually going through, what should be the role that the financing institutions or these commercial banks should play, and how should state bank reflect on those, and how we have to actually move forward in this socioeconomic turmoil. And we actually came up with some good suggestions. Particularly, a lot has been discussed around the green financing guidelines. We also looked at crafting a different frameworks for sustainable finance and issuance through use of financing instruments such as bonds. We also sort of talked a bit about the debt swaps as well, and how we can actually also, a lot of areas touched by the panelists were around the leveraging multilateral or International Monetary Fund was also came into discussion for improved public intervention, investment management, and different financial performances as well. The building the expertise of climate financing actually came as one of the very key pillars. Doing these workshops, tools, and also sort of coming up with perhaps a group of these green investors as well. Then we also sort of highlighted how we actually need to empower these project developers by enhancing their viability and accessibility of investments through these training and guidances. And a lot has been actually discussed. Now, after this, what we're actually moving towards, or what we're shifting towards, is what are some of the key instruments or that currently do exist. Alternate financing mechanisms maybe will also be touching upon the bonds, these different loans, concessional schemes. We'll also be talking about why Pakistan what has been some of the very key challenges, why Pakistan has not been able to mobilize that much of financing, which was eventually required. What have been some of the challenges, why Pakistan has not been prepared to do that. And we'll be discussing a lot, particularly in the context of China-Pakistan economic corridor as well, because CPEC has been one of the key areas where a lot of financing has come to Pakistan. So that would also remain as one of the discussion areas as well. So as we go, let me first very quickly introduce your panels. We're very pleased to have been joined by Dr. Christoph Meadow-Pilwang from the director at Griffith Asia Institute, and Dr. Christoph is one of the leading experts in the green financing, particularly around the BRI countries, and he is also one of the founding members of the Green CPEC Alliance, which Dr. Christoph, SDPI, and Pakistan China Institute launched almost 2.5 years back. And yeah, Dr. Christoph has supported a lot in this, and he's also working on some of these themes. So he'll be giving his, we'll be first coming to him a bit later. Then we have also been joined by Ms. Faiza. She is also currently working also as a head of inclusive finance and Tangent, and also she has been working in the green financing field in collaboration with the IFC. She has taken up a lot of these new projects and have developed a lot of those, but I'll also be requesting Ms. Faiza to also sort of give her introduction in that context as well. We have been joined by Mr. Asad Mahmood, who's the energy efficiency and renewable energy expert. Asad Saab has also been dealing with the carbon market the initiative and the theme and he'll be highlighting a lot on those side as well. We're very pleased to also being joined by Ms. Durre, the climate policy specialist at Oxford Policy Management, and most of the financing experts in Pakistan know Durre from all the wonderful work she has actually done, particularly around preparation of different projects and how do we actually come up with these strong proposals that can actually tap in. And then last but not the least, we have been joined by two colleagues from SDPI, Dr. Khalid Walid, who's currently working as a research fellow. Dr. Khalid is in the panel, and also Ms. Sona Osmani, who's currently working as a researcher at SDPI, and Sona will be speaking aloud the potential of exploring the use of just energy transition partnerships. So with this, I mean, we are all pretty much aware of the theme that we actually have, what we have actually been discussing the day out, and what this session particularly pertains. So the key questions we're actually trying to sort of answer is sort of to evaluate the impact of various these mechanisms, including, I mean, we initially had the Asian Development Bank's energy transition mechanisms, the JETPs are there, any of the green innovation. I mean, China has just recently came up with its GIFPI plan, the Green Innovation Financing Platform, and how these mechanisms can actually be used to uptake the further of renewable energy in Pakistan. Secondly, we'll be exploring these different mechanisms and assessing their feasibility, particularly in reference to Pakistan. And lastly, we'll be evaluating the challenges and barriers associated with leveraging the alternate financing mechanisms for renewable energy uptake in Pakistan. So firstly, let me come to Dr. Christophe Nedoh-Villevang. Dr. Christophe, you have been again speaking, but particularly for this summit, I'll be now coming to you to sort of respond, and if you want to, for your address meeting. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Chris.
Yeah, so thanks so much, and thanks so much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. And good morning and afternoon. I think evening for me here in Brisbane. It's an honor to be here and to discuss innovative climate finance instruments that could be relevant for Pakistan's green energy transition, against the backdrop of a lot of the topics that what you have also just so very eloquently summarized, and really also already enjoyed the first half of the session and the introduction of the study. So it's really great that SDPI continues to push the boundaries and see what's possible for, I think, a really timely and important topic of the green energy transition. And I think it's also important to always recognize that a lot of challenges lie ahead. I think we all agree on that, but also that there's a lot of progress that has already been made. So it's not that we're starting from scratch. And that's, I think, also very much due to great organizations in Pakistan, including SDPI. So I think what I'm trying to wrap my head around is again a little bit these climate finance instruments and finding the right climate finance instruments. And I think I can also share a little bit what we've been doing over the last years. So I mentioned already the Green CPEC Alliance. So that's really, I think, important not only for Pakistan, but much more for overall the Belt and Road Initiative, because CPEC remains the most important corridor for the BRI. And so if we can show that we can green CPEC, and particularly energy space, I think there's a lot of lessons learned also for other countries and other corporations. I also worked with the UNDP last year and over the last couple of years, looking at sovereign debt issues, and Pakistan was actually one of our 4 core cases where we looked at how sovereign debt can be greened. And so I'll touch upon that, and then there's a lot of work going on the question of early coal, phase down, phase out, and also, of course, in collaboration with China. That's, I think, also extremely interesting what's going on. One of the things that we always then look at when we engage with the different stakeholders, and particularly finance institutions, is to understand, first of all, the underlying risk factors, because finance is all about risk management. That's kind of the basics of finance is how do we make money? And we want to have more money tomorrow than today, under the assumption of risk. And I think this has been, as I think we all agree, been a challenge for a lot of emerging economies. That's why many emerging economies just don't receive the climate financing that is required. But also a particular challenge for Pakistan, be it because of the sovereign debt issues, be it because of political uncertainties, economic challenges, but also just kind of the reality that climate change has an impact. And so investors are also seeing kind of these real physical risks in Pakistan. So I think these are a couple of challenges that we have to always keep in mind if we are thinking about what type of financing instruments can actually be really applicable, and particularly for larger scale infrastructure projects and the green transition. So I think in light of these challenges, kind of the question is kind of what are ways for Pakistan to attract climate financing? And then the second question though is, what is our goal? What do we actually want to do? And this again impacts kind of the climate financing instruments that might be relevant. Do we want more energy, more electricity? Do we want new electricity, so change the old to the new? Or do we want more energy efficiency? And I think all of these, particularly the second and the third, are actually more likely to kind of are in line with the goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So switching energy, so new from old to new is good. Just having new and more energy probably is not so good, because we're still polluting with the existing coal assets in particular. And more energy efficiency, I think probably one of the really interesting questions that too few nations, and including where I'm in Australia, we're not exploring sufficiently. We're always talking about just we need more energy or switch energy. So kind of keeping that in our mind, then the next question did we, I think, kind of just also not just from a theoretical, but really practical question is, do we want, in terms of financing, do we want, again, more financing, or do we reorient existing debt to green? And this is something that we've done really extensively, again, with the UNDP. It's reorienting sovereign debt. And there we really try to distinguish and really kind of developing the instruments and doing the analysis for a number of different countries, including Pakistan. How much do we actually need to reorient existing debt towards green? And so that's kind of debt for X swaps in particular. And how much ability do we have to raise new green capital? And one of the things that I think we have to keep in our mind, that our analysis shows that I think a primary source for Pakistan should be to reorient existing debt towards green, rather than trying to kind of really aggressively raise new capital. And the simple kind of reason is that there is just a lot of challenges right now, and continues to be challenges to access global capital markets. The financing costs are very high. And so kind of under the current circumstances, the question is kind of what type of instruments is applicable, and the reorientation seems, so reorientation of existing debt seems to be quite relevant. Now kind of keeping that in mind, one of the things that we then also looked at is the possibility for debt for climate or debt for renewable swaps. What kind of in your first presentation, you also showed kind of debt for nature swaps. Debt for nature swaps is kind of one of these swaps instruments, and you correctly highlighted that this is particularly relevant for biodiversity protection. But there are also other debt swaps, including debt for climate or debt for renewable swaps, very similar. And the mechanisms that they work under are all kind of borrowed from this debt for climate swaps, debt for nature swaps that have been applied quite extensively over the last couple of years, have died down a little bit now, but overall, I think quite successfully, to really reduce the levels of debt while doing the right things for the green. And that's, I think, gives an interesting opportunity, particularly to refinance existing coal-fired power plants against the promise to retire early. So that would be kind of the, I think, the best outcome to reduce the level of debt that is associated with existing coal-fired power plants against the promise to retire early. And so that's kind of a debt for climate swap. So that's something that would be have to be really well negotiated with the current financiers, and that's often China. So that's really the reorienting existing debt to green, use some of the debt to finance green. The other question that is really interesting, and this is not, again, just Pakistan, this is a lot of countries that are also part of JETP, so Just Energy Transition Partnership, is the question of foreign exchange risks. And this is also something that I think investors are very worried about, but of course also the debtors like Pakistani partners would be very worried about. If the financing from international partners comes in US dollars, who's covering the foreign exchange risks? And so the question that I think a lot of us are trying to work with is what type of foreign exchange risk or foreign exchange guarantees are applicable to reduce some of these risks for investors, and of course also for Pakistan, because Pakistan also does not want to deal with these foreign exchange risks. And then kind of finally, in terms of energy efficiency, I know Pakistan has a couple of years ago really evaluated having carbon markets and even linking the Pakistani carbon market with the Chinese carbon market. I have the feeling this has died down. But in terms of energy efficiency, I think it would be a really interesting question to explore again. Because if we want to reduce the energy consumption, which is, again, very good in terms of greening an energy system, then kind of charging ideally the customers, particularly kind of those that can afford it. It's all a question of justness and equity, but kind of exploring kind of a well-designed carbon market. And again, Pakistan would not be the only developing country that has introduced a carbon market. Many developing countries over the last years have introduced a carbon price, and this will most likely also continue as a form for the government to kind of steer to a lower carbon future, while also kind of raising funds to support lower income communities or the energy transition. So I'll stop here. Hopefully,
yes,
we'll
thank
have a
you.
very good
Thank you
discussion.
so much, Dr. Christoph. That's very enlightening. All the instruments that you mentioned. Just have one very quick question, not a question, but perhaps sort of a comment from which we need from your end. That I mean, we all do understand that when we're actually talking about CPEC or the Chinese investor, currently there is some reluctance, just given because the very uncertain economic condition of Pakistan and all the economic challenges which we have been facing through. How do you see, if you have any recommendations, because we do have Faisal Shafat Sahab sitting here from the State Bank of Pakistan, do you have any recommendations for Pakistan's central bank, like, or any of the commercial banks? What role should we as a country as a whole play to sort of address that risk that currently exists between the both, or that sort of limited friendly environment that currently exists between for the investors, Chinese investors, to come and invest in Pakistan in this sector? Yeah, any two key pointers that you have currently for the central bank? Or, yeah, you muted.
I said I wish, I think kind of these are much smarter people here in the room than me to kind of understand some of the kind of real restrictions and complexities about this. I don't think there's a easy fix. I think there is kind of one of the things that I think is extremely positive and that should be utilized properly, that both sides have a very strong desire on the policy level to remain very strong and good relationships. And particularly when engaging in any form of debt restructuring and potentially a debt swap that comes with some form of debt forgiveness, which is most likely kind of would be very good for Pakistan. Such a good relationship is the basis. And so one of the other things that I can share is that Egypt has been able to sign an MOU with China to engage in debt for climate swaps. One of the reasons why they've been very successful in actually pushing it that far is because they have really spoken with a very uniform voice at a lot of different meetings to kind of address the Chinese and to show their interest, but also show the Chinese kind of what the advantages are. And kind of for those who are interested, we can provide you also with some information, and we've also shared it with the Chinese side, so it's not kind of absolutely a secret. It might make sense, not even under very specific rare circumstances, but under very kind of financially prudent circumstances for the Chinese to engage in a debt swap, particularly under the current circumstances, to kind of, it would really be a win-win-win situation for Pakistan, for the Chinese investors, and ideally also for the environment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Christoph. That's extremely helpful, and we'll definitely be delving into that. Let me come to Ms. Faiza Khan. Ms. Faiza, you have been, again, working with the IFC. Let me just mention Ms. Faiza is also World Bank certified climate financing expert, and just recently you did a very wonderful study on greening of the CPEC and what, so based upon that, looking at CPEC as one of the key opportunities, and that a lot can actually be done. If you can very briefly highlight what are some of the key learnings from China's sustainability and green finance journey, and what are some of the policy implications we actually have and some of the lessons learned. Secondly, if you can also sort of highlight how do you see the overall green financing landscape of Pakistan, what are some of the major challenges and opportunities and instruments that we need to harness or which we actually have to go along with. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Faiza. With this, over to you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that very generous intro. And just to set the sort of context for Pakistan, so I was part of the team that helped to establish the green banking guidelines for the central bank. So that was part of my role at the World Bank Group. And recently, there's also been the ESRM guidelines, which were developed in collaboration with the central bank. So that's the context. And again, I've worked on some climate financing projects, not just in Pakistan, but about 7-8 countries as well. That was just to set the context. So again, the CPEC journey, personally, I expected more after almost a decade of Pakistan's CPEC journey. I expected more, you could say, permeation of information on both sides. So, some of that has happened. Some of it is work in progress, and I would love to see the stakeholders, put that on full throttle. But that we can address later. But coming back to your first question about the China journey. So again, China has had an evolution that Pakistan can aspire to, although the size of the ecosystem is very, very, very different. You could say the structure is very, very, very different. But having said that, having done a couple of projects in collaboration with, such as the China Saving Postal Bank and the Three Gorges project, it's not so. Let's say there are overlaps as well, and there are sort of points of commonality, which I feel that Pakistan can very positively leverage those sort of opportunities. So again, China on the sort of horizon of sustainability is ahead of the curve as compared to Pakistan. Because in the sort of world of the SBFN, which is the Sustainable Banking and Finance Coalition, SBFN network, sorry. So China is part of the matured markets, and Pakistan is a notch below. We're in the implementation stage, and implementation, and so you could say we're sort of closer to the maturing stage because of all the sort of green banking guidelines and so on. Although that's all work in progress. So, you know, some of the sort of learnings that you know, that we need to imbibe from the China experience is that, you know, all the sort of major CPEC projects have a bulk of the financing from the sort of main Chinese, either the policy banks or the other banks. So mainly it's the ICBCs, the CCBs, the what else? Exim Bank, the BOC. So these are the sort of major sort of banks which are financing these projects, along with some portion being financed by Pakistani banks, and you know, significant portions being financed by the government as well, or at least a coalition led by the government. So there's an opportunity here, and you know, when you sort of when you speak to project managers on the Chinese bank side, so their regulations are being stringently adhered to, but I just don't see the sort of flow of information. And again, the reasons could be innocuous. I mean, it's not willful. It's simply, I think, like you could say, you know, Pakistan has a much higher exposure to Anglophone countries, so it's a bit of a language and cultural issue as well. And also, Chinese banks are not necessarily the most transparent in terms of, you know, if you sort of go to their websites and you try to download their ESRM manuals or ESRM guidelines or policies and so on. So, but having said that, when you speak to the stakeholders over there, they're extremely willing to sort of share those. So I think there needs to be sort of more sort of you could say policy talk between the stakeholders on this side of the pond, or this side of the desert rather, and you know, the sort of Chinese stakeholders there. So briefly, you know, the sort of evolution started from, you know, the People's Bank of China, and now, you know, it's sort of stewardship is you know, by the with the CIRBC. I hope I'm sort of saying the acronym right. CBIRC, yes, that's right. Take the stewardship of the regulatory, and it's a very dynamic sort of organization. They're still working on making, you know, tweaking and making the green you could say policy more fluid. It's very responsive to the market. So, you know, on one side, you know, there's that whole sort of narrative in our minds about, you know, the strength of state control in China. But having said that, there's also this other side which is very, you could say, open to the market, or open to market needs. And, you know, it really takes in the opinion of the private sector, and it's very quick to sort of sandbox those regulations and to sort of get them off the ground. So, you know, I find that is like one thing which maybe our, you know, central bank and the other regulators, such as the SECP, etc., need to sort of take more on board. While they've made a great start with initiatives such as the sort of green banking guidelines, ESRM, and so on, and you know, on the SECP side, there is taxonomy that's being sort of worked upon at the moment, and I'm sure that's going to lead to good results as well. Again, you know, there's one side, there's the whole very well regulated, and I'm talking about Pakistan now. So there's that whole sector, you know, the banking sector, which reports in frequently the, you could say, the human resources are of a certain quality, and so on the side. And then there's the bottom of the pyramid, you know, the microfinance sector. So each has a role to play. Each has a very different risk. So again, I'll just, you know, sort of come back to something that Dr. Christoph was saying a while ago. So the whole risk paradigm, needs to be seen very differently by banks, because it's a business case for their own good. It's not just currently, the sort of narrative out there, except for like one or two banks where you could say the green banking department is much more nuanced and not knowledgeable. Other than that, most of the banks, I feel see it as a cumbersome exercise to be sort of doing these reports for the central bank on and off. So that's where I think the banks need to incorporate that culture as a major fundamental part of the risk paradigm, because the ability to pay from a certain company is heavily impacted by the environmental procedure which it has followed or not followed, and that needs to be imbibed into the pricing policy as well. So the pricing from the banks needs to reflect that, but to understand those risks, banks need to see beyond the greenwashing. And they need to sort of see the real you could say the core of the environmental problem. So while there are lots of stakeholders out there, we do have to keep in mind that yes, for the larger projects, it's very easy to get those assessments and the reports done. For the medium-sized companies, they'll be forced to they will have budgetary thoughts, budgetary concerns, and that's where I'd say I'm just speaking from my IFC experience. So there are sort of assessment tools that they can access, such as the CAFE tool, which is a sort of a tool that helps financial institutions just sort of you could say do their assessments. So green banking guidelines sort of cover three things, right? So first of course, it's the portfolio level interjections, you could say, portfolio level assessment, where you assess the portfolio or your exposure. The second part of that is, how deep are your own products? Whether you have enough products that respond to market needs in terms of, green bonds, blue bonds, other sort of, and then, differentiated instruments within that range. And the third thing is, I think one of the bankers touched upon that as well, their own, how they're making efforts to reduce their own sort of carbon footprint, their own paper usage, and that kind of thing. So all these things.
Sort of conclude in 1 minute. We'll come back to you again in the panel. Yeah, if you can sort of conclude the discussion a bit quickly, we can come back again.
Yes, I do tend to be very verbal. So yes, so these are the sort of tools. I'll just quickly mention these. So there's the EDGE certificate, which looks at the sort of green buildings, or let's say it gives a kind of a risk measure to the sort of the green element in building. And that is, quite important in the Pakistan context, because there's a large part of the portfolio which is exposed to you could say construction. And one other thing which I will quickly like to mention is again about the stakeholders in Pakistan. While the central bank and the SCP and the other stakeholders, they're engaged fairly rigorously, there are sort of parallel organizations, or you could say players, such as the newly developed SIFC. Again, SIFC is also stewarding major projects. And again, rather than reinvent the wheel, they also need to be on board regarding the sort of steps that have been taken so far by people at the central bank, at the SECP, for sort of large companies, medium-sized, SMEs, micro. So that all
Yes.
all the stakeholders need to be talking to each other.
Yes.
I'll stop there.
Thank
So you
you.
can
Thank you
bring in
so much, Ms. Faiza. Yes, thank you so much. No, this was, we really loved, it was wonderful listening from you. And you have highlighted these initiatives as well as the China's financing journey, as well as all your key recommendations are very well noted. We'll come back to you again. But first, let me move to Dr. Khalid. Dr. Khalid has again been looking through the green financing, both from the CPEC perspective as well as green financing Pakistan as a whole. So, talking about these alternate financing mechanisms, Dr. Khalid, what is your perspective and take over here? And after you, I'll be coming to individual tools, firstly to Durid and to Asad Saab, and then so on. Yeah, over to you, Dr. Khalid. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ubaid. Thank you so much, panelists. Let me start with telling you very obvious three stories that are being happening in Pakistan. Dr. Christoph has touched upon them, Ms. Faiza touched upon them. But let me just build this context here through these stories. First story is the excess capacity that we have installed. And in that excess capacity sort of scenario and this constrained economic turmoil sort of scenario, addition to capacity, that will not make any sense right now. Second, the story of transmission constraints that we have, that the transmission grid system that would not support the variable renewable energy integration that require investments as well. Third story is obviously starts from the financial side. It is the financial instability of power sector in Pakistan. If you particularly see it from the lens of CPEC-based IPPs, you'll see that both mode of IPPs, either they are coal-based asset in Pakistan under China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or either they are solar or wind particularly. You'll see both are facing financial instabilities. The coal power plants, their utilization rate are being dropped on account of rising coal, imported coal price in the globe, keeping in mind this poly crisis sort of scenario. Right now, these three coal power plants under CPEC, their utilization rate is about 15 to 20%, which increases their capacity charges, and those capacity charges are linked with interest rate, global interest rate, inflation in Pakistan, inflation in USA, exchange rate. So there is a volatility, macroeconomic volatility that is associated with these coal-based assets and investments under CPEC. So these assets have now become the stranded sort of assets. I would resonate Dr. Christoph's opinion that you would not require more loans. You would need to reorient these loans. Maybe I would use the word of repurposing of these power plants. Maybe through some sort of innovative alternating financing mechanism. Maybe that would be Vera is having some early consultation on coal to clean credit sort of initiatives where the carbon markets can be used to early retire these assets, and maybe those assets can be repurposed in some sort of a solar or hybrid sort of system. Another thing that happened in early 2024, that Chinese company that signed a deal with Pakistani public sector Genco to repurpose it from thermal power to solar plant, that would be explored further. Again, taking lead from the financial instability, what is happening in Pakistan right now is the Chinese asset, they are facing financial instabilities, and Chinese model that is based on their Sinosure-based guarantees. They need to have some sort of a guarantee from Sinosure in order to invest in Pakistan. If you want to attract more renewable energy financial flows flowing in Pakistan, you'll need this guarantee from Sinosure. That would not be happening because there is financial instability for existing sort of coal assets in Pakistan under CPEC. So what can be done? Maybe central bank or colleague from central bank is also here. Central bank can sort of provide this conducive environment talking with Chinese financial institution, particularly the guarantors, particularly Sinosure, maybe that can provide some sort of conducive environment for Chinese investments to flow in Pakistan, and maybe repurposing of those investment, in repurposing of those Chinese asset in terms of coal power plants. That could be done. Secondly, we need to attract more and more investments in Pakistan's grid system as well. If we want to integrate more renewable energy, that could be a major bottleneck, and financial inflows should be flow in that direction as well. Thirdly, the world has changed. I guess the utility-based major sort of, I would say, capital-intensive sort of power plants that might not be feasible in future. The world is now shifting toward distributed generation systems, community-based grid systems. That might be another area where investments can be flown in under CPEC. And as a whole, if you talk about just energy transition partnerships, if you talk about ETMs, or other sort of coal accelerator, retirement accelerator sort of programs. So these are some things where the new generation can be installed, but in this particular Pakistan scenario, a major utility-based or major capital-intensive sort of capacity addition in terms of renewable energy, that might not be favorable unless you retire some of the fossil fuel based power plants. So repurposing makes a lot of sense right now. Lastly, I would want to see how Pakistan's financial architecture can go hand in hand with Chinese or global financial architecture, so that it would be more conducive for private investors to jump in and sort of kickstart this community-based grid systems and distributed sort of generation. Lastly, you also heard news firing around in Pakistan, that is the net metering, the revolution of rooftop solar in Pakistan. That would also provide another opportunity to sort of transform our consumption mix from residential sector to industrial sector. So if industrial sector get backs on the national grid, that would also generate some sort of power sector demand, and that could be catered through distributed generation systems, maybe special economic zones that have been developed under CPEC that could be linked with distributed generation systems based on solar and wind. These could be some sort of innovative thing, but he would be, I would borrow the term from Dr. Christoph, that reorientation of existing debt and repurposing these power plants, not just in terms of physical assets, but also the repurposing of their financial sort of architecture. That would be helpful for Pakistan in the longer run, and particularly in this short to medium term as well. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Khalid. You very well incorporated these things. So yeah, thank you so much for all the recommendations. Well noted. So just taking lead and coming to Durre, that you also talked about need to increasing energy demand, and as of now, I mean, given the whole economic crisis, the energy industry also needs some sort of alternate economic engines that can actually expedite these, mobilize the financing. So Durre, you have been doing a lot of work around the project preparation facilities. So if you can sort of respond, like what are some of the challenges that we do face when Pakistan talk about harvesting or mobilizing or using those green transition funds for its energy transition? And if you also sort of would like to highlight some of the innovative climate financing funds that are available, which can be sort of replicated in this context. So with this, coming to you, Durre, over to you. Yeah, I hope, yeah.
Hi, sorry, I'm just saving my bandwidth to just keep my camera off. Thank you, Beth, for the generous introduction. Really happy to share panel with such learned colleagues, but definitely I'll be speaking from my experience with project preparation facilities. And here, as a PPF, we are providing sort of technical assistance support to the private sector, mainly to sort of scale up the RE and adaptation financing in Pakistan and abroad. So like Abed said, that, you know, the sort of current challenges that we have includes market risk, lack of private sector investment. I think these climate investment funds are great if Pakistan could tap in, because they would cater the risk part and also sort of enhance the attractiveness of projects in conformance with the safe requirements, and sort of leverage the additional private sector capital that's required for these bankable projects. Now, the challenges that you spoke of, definitely private sector does not have any clue what these funds are, where they are. So first challenge, definitely, I would say, is the lack of information. That's number one. The second is they do not have a project preparation facility access, because it's also expensive to sort of get those services, get those consulting. So that's another issue. Now, having said that, what I would suggest is that, you know, we also had discussed that there should be a centralized mechanism. We already have a climate fund unit set up in Ministry of Climate Change. They're also coordinating for GCF and Adaptation Fund. Now they can pretty much take up that additional role for other funds out there. Like you said that, you know, for example, there's this fund called Dutch Fund for Climate Change and Development. Now this is again a Dutch fund that works in consortium, provides financing to private sector to scale up renewable energy investment in Pakistan. And through that, as a project preparations facility, we were sort of mobilized about 30 million euros. We actually bought that grant in Pakistan to support these industries in Sindh. Now, not a lot of people know about this particular fund. So what's happening that international development partners, INGOs are like reaching to the private sector. So there has to be a central coordination mechanism, first of all, that's missing, so that, you know, more private sector companies could access these investment finance. Very importantly, GCF, we know that Pakistan is quite far behind in terms of accessing climate finance, especially for the mitigation projects. We still are having a lot of adaptation projects in the pipeline, but we still cannot access the renewable energy financing through GCF facilities, whether it's equity or whether it's grant, and also the loan. So they do have those options. Now, what's stopping us? Definitely, I have seen as PPAF that in Pacific, in Africa, in other Asian countries, they have a lot of regional projects that they are pitching to the GCF. But in Pakistan, I highly doubt that we haven't gone in any of the regional projects. So the regional partnerships are very crucial right now at a country level. It also sort of enhances the capacity, improves cross-border collaboration, and some of these big targets that these banks have. So that's another challenge, and I think that's where we should be going. And it doesn't mean that we should have more accredited entities. The existing national accredited entities are enough, and also the international direct access entities are there. So our local organization have to come up with a lucrative, innovative, bankable projects, need to partner with them. These guys, the international development access entities, have that development story. They can provide that technical support. And this is what we're doing at Oxford Policy Management right now. We're providing sort of support in terms of feasibility for GCF and also proposal development for different various clients. Another important facility that not a lot of people know is actually NAMA, which now is NAFA. So that was Nationally Appropriate Mitigation Action facility. We through, again, WWF has tapped in some funding for the decarbonization of the textile sector and some projects there. So now they have actually renamed their facility. It's called National Action Facility. And they have last year just disbursed 100 million all over the world. So I don't know why Pakistan was unable to tap in any project through NAFA facility. So I think, again, NECA and Ministry of Climate Change also has to coordinate. I've spoken to a lot of industries out there. They are ready to do. They're ready to put in money. This is what we saw in DSCD. It was a hit. Although the Dutch bank just provided sort of like 2 million to de-risk the sector, to just provide feasibilities and pilot support, because, you know, private sector is a little hesitant to like sort of do those sort of pilots or invest in terms of feasibilities. And that was covered through this particular grant. And you would be surprised that over 30 million basically came from private sector itself in Pakistan. And they were willing to sort of go for these international facilities, and even did not have any problem with international loans, whether it was in euros or USD. So it's mainly, I really think it's definitely the information that's lagging somewhere, and our central ministries have to play that active coordination role out there. They should probably advertise, there should be portals out there which could sort of help bridge that gap between the private sector and these funds that are out there and willing to invest in Pakistan. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Nuria, for wonderfully summarizing these points and how we some very good recommendations. I think we can also see a lot of synergies to take forward. So thank you so much. Now again, coming to Asad Mahmood Saab, with one of the key financing tools he specializes in. Asad Saab, you have been working long for the carbon market, around carbon markets, carbon trading. When we actually talk about the whole renewable energy sector and carbon markets as an alternate financing mechanism, how good do you see the relevance, and how do we actually go about it? What opportunities do we exist, and how do we actually, what are some of the key recommendations, and if there are any some challenges to sort of tap into that opportunity? Over to you, Asad.
Yeah, thank you very much, and very good points and keywords which our earlier speakers have given already. So, like my perspective would be like when we talk about specific theme of this session, leading towards energy transition, accelerating energy transition, in fact. So, in that context, like I see carbon market and energy transition as two sides of the same coin, and how and the tools and tackles and the perspective and lens that is required from different stakeholders. So that is something that needs to be defined, and that is possible through the capacity building interventions from public sector and private sector. Just like an eminent expert, Ms. Dure, also like stated about alignment of all the departments in terms of their working and as per their rules of business and understanding, and developing a unity to get international financing tapped in into some real meaningful projects. So in context of, again, like from carbon market perspective, the ministry has a stance that don't go for easy carbon projects, go for high-end engineering projects. So energy sector is the one where one can look at, and it's not only solar and wind, because solar is now business as usual, as you have been also participating in sort of different like sessions regarding VCMs. So the people from the registries themselves are now looking into other means. So presently in Pakistan, if government is looking into decentralized generation or things like related to battery energy storage systems, so all those could be coupled, or there should be a holistic plan developed across Pakistan as a strategy to that how it could be covered under ITMOS, or how it could be covered under the VCM regime. So this is up to like the about our decision makers to take a look into this thing, that don't miss the opportunity and bring in the additionality criteria. And this battery energy storage system is also like going to help us in not only the storage, which is basically the problem of the intermittency of renewables, grid stability, but also like the carbon offsetting aspect from the industries which are export oriented, or even not though export oriented, but still want to maintain their carbon footprint at prescribed levels or their own specified targets. So they can look into this carbon market as a tool, carbon offsetting and other aspects which have to be there. So although like we most of the wind power projects, as you see in the CDM regime, there were some wind power projects, but again, when we talk about energy projects, it's also the energy efficiency and demand side reduction, which presently seems in Pakistan not the priority, because like we have excessive capacity. But what I will pitch into to look into such programs which can where we can have a rebound effect of energy efficiency through sort of some sort of carbon market tools or projects developed through that lens. So that way we can like be more productive, and the GNP of the country can also be facilitated in through those local means and tools and tackles. So I'll stop over here and definitely will pitch in later on wherever required.
Thank you so much, Asad Saab. So I think let us at the same time, before going to second round, let me invite Zona for her take interventions on the Just Energy Transition partnerships that's currently in the domain. I mean, definitely there has not been any official stance from the government of Pakistan around it. I mean, we're talking about the need for a Just Energy Transition, but JETP's model has not been something that has currently been taken up. There was a lot of discussion going around it during the last COP, but definitely a lot needs to be worked upon. We have to very deeply analyze the mechanism in itself. Is it going to generate the funding? I mean, the case for Pakistan is a bit different as well. But yeah, I think let us come to Zona for her interventions on this. Yeah, over to you. Then we'll be going to the second.
Thank you for inviting me here today. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so most of you might be familiar with the JETPs, but just to quickly introduce JETPs for those who may not be very familiar with the concept and the framework. So JETPs essentially emerged as a framework at COP26 in Glasgow, driven by the UK's leadership of the G7 and the COP presidency at that time. So the primary aim of the JETPs is to help lower and middle income countries to decarbonize their power sector and transition from coal by addressing their lack of access to capital for clean energy investments. Now, if we look at the three primary objectives of the JETPs, they're mainly decarbonizing the power sector by mainly focusing on the phasing out coal. Secondly, it's achieving sustainable development goals. And thirdly, and the most important, is ensuring a just transition for workers and the communities involved. So if we look at the past agreements since 2021, 4 JETPs have been agreed upon between South Africa, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Senegal. And if we look at the framework or the structure of JETPs, it's a partnership between donor groups called the international partner groups and the recipient countries. So the IPGs typically include the G5, the EU, and the individual countries, along with the significant role played by the private actors like the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. So if we talk about the recipient countries, high-level political engagement is crucial, often involving task forces or interministerial committees to ensure broad and effective implementation, particularly in the energy sector. So before discussing how JETPs could be beneficial for Pakistan, I just want to highlight 3 main issues that have arisen with JETPs in the past, and these points are crucial for considering JETPs in Pakistan. So firstly, I would just want to discuss that much of the financing that is provided is as loans rather than grants. So potentially this would increase debt traps and foreign capital objectives over domestic ones. Additionally, the conditions attached to these loans can be restrictive and give significant power to the donors. Another problem is that, for example, in South Africa, we've seen that the success of their JETPs has been undermined by the crisis at Eskom, the public utility. So therefore, I feel like that attention to the institutional capacity and stability is essential. Thirdly, I would just like to highlight that there have been issues with the involvement of civil society and the stakeholders, which is a critical component given that justice is one of the main dimensions of the JETPs. Now, if we look at Pakistan and how JETPs could be beneficial, I would just like to point out that Pakistan relies heavily on coal for energy, which is problematic because much of it is imported, making the country vulnerable to price shocks and so on. Moving away from coal, therefore, requires a deep consideration of the social and the local impacts, especially the political economy of coal phase out. So I would say that engagement with the local communities and particularly the Chinese stakeholders who are significant, who play a significant role in Pakistan's coal sector is essential. And if we look at the renewable energy, Pakistan faces issues with inconsistent regulations, policies, and infrastructure, investment in infrastructure. So what JETPs can offer is that both technical and financial assistance to address these challenges. However, the solutions must include grants and concessional financing, not just loans, to catalyze the investment effectively. So I would just say that coherent regulations and government buy-ins are also very necessary. So just to conclude it all, I would just say that JETPs offers a potential pathway for Pakistan to decarbonize its energy sector. However, we need to see and learn from lessons from existing JETPs must be considered, especially regarding the inclusion of China, a major stakeholder in Pakistan's power plant. So constructive discussions and collaborations are, I think, very important to see how a just transition could be achieved in context of where China is a major energy stakeholder. So that is it from my side. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Zona. That was wonderful, giving the whole perspective of the JETP, starting from what it is, and yeah, I think we do have some points around those. A lot is being again further analyzed. So again, let me just come back to Dr. Christoph if he has any reflections on what other speakers have mentioned, and if he wants to sort of add on to any of those points. And more importantly, Dr. Christoph, for this summit. Since we have been discussing initially the role of financing institutions and now these finance instruments, now as we again go towards any steps that leads to perhaps any short-term or medium-term impact, do you have, if you have any key one or two recommendations that can be pitched through this platform? So yeah, with this overview, if you have any other points, feel free to add. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the contributions and interventions from all of the great panelists. It's such an honor to be and a privilege to be with all of you. I think the short-term solutions, I don't know, kind of nothing is easy except one kind of understanding some of the rules of finance. I think kind of the drive to make a financial gain for a lot of the investors, and also that also includes Chinese investors, of course. They want to make they invest in order to make a financial return. There might be a political return as well, but so a financial return is usually required. And I think it's really great to see all of this engagement that Pakistan has. And I think the two things that I said before, kind of just reiterate also kind of after hearing all this. Number one is getting CPEC right. And I think with all of the capacity that we also just saw here, but also I know it's just available, getting CPEC right is really an opportunity. And it's an opportunity also for China. So kind of keeping that in mind is important. Number two is to have very clear asks when particularly engaging with any stakeholders, including the Chinese. What is the advantage for Chinese, for example, to engage in any of the investments that that have also been discussed here? What is the advantage for China? What is the advantage why China should engage that? And how can we get also really the buy-in of the different stakeholders? So I think this is, I think more as a general guiding principle, is definitely not an easy fix, but it's possible.
Yeah, yes, thank you so much, Dr. Christoph. Again, now coming to Ms. Faiza. Ms. Faiza, yeah, again, keeping now a focus on what needs to be done, perhaps, how do we actually look forward from this point? Dr. Christoph has, I think, very rightly mentioned about using China as exactly one of the tools. So if you want to definitely build upon that and also bring in anything further from your end, especially since you have worked with the IFC, you have been engaged with the World Bank, this is actually one of the very key players that needs to be bring in the discussion while we're having. So yeah, over to you.
Again, I will just continue on that theme that was just mentioned, that we have some low-hanging fruits, and I'll just echo what was said, that we need to get CPEC right, because there's a lot at stake more for Pakistan than for China, but for them as well. But absolutely, there's too much at stake. For we can't afford to not get it right. So the opportunities are sort of multifold. There are some that are absolute low-hanging fruits. So for example, there's a whole kind of a knowledge network or a knowledge sort of database that hasn't been disseminated, or those learnings have not really been imbibed by the sector at large. I can give the example of the Quaid-e-Azam solar park. So a solar park for all its purposes, it sounds like a dream on paper, because Pakistan has ample sunlight, and then it's solar, and so everyone was gung-ho about the project. But there are some learnings, because there were some metrics which were not met, and that was because of and there are sort of you could say case studies which haven't really been disseminated, maybe because of political reasons. And that's the role that STPI can play, because then you can act as sort of the apex body that's there just to disseminate knowledge without getting into the politics of it. So for example, the sort of solar panels that were installed at the Quaid-e-Azam solar park, there were capacity issues because of the sort of the sort of sand settlements on them, because they were in a place that was so open. Yes, you do need an open park for a solar park, but there was no sort of green protection around it. That's one. Then the maintenance costs were quite high, and there are other such learnings. Again, similar projects, Suki Kinari. So there was, you could say, bricks made out of the ash that was emanated from that project. Now that is something that was not replicated because no one really knows about it, and that technology hasn't really been transferred. So the low-hanging fruit is technology and knowledge transfer.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Faiza. Wonderful. So now again coming to Durre. Durre, you have been again previously also talking about the Green Transition Fund and innovative climate financing tools as well. So again, in your perspective, if you would like to further add on anything, or any key recommendation, like in medium to short run, how do we go about it? And especially if you could also sort of, because you're also working in policy management, like how these think tanks such as SDPI and these institutions such as OPM and these consultants, how do they really to perhaps also support the whole idea, and how do they play a very effective role as well? Yeah.
So quickly, definitely, like I said, that the key coordination agency has to play an active role, whether it's at the ministry or in your NAG departments. Somebody has to take that lead, right? Secondly, what's more important is definitely STPI and OPM. Sorry, my country director's here. He's just saying hi to everybody. Anyway, so the second thing is that management consulting firms like OPM and STPI can actually play an active role in providing that feasibility support. Like Ma'am Faiza just mentioned that the solar park was there and then there weren't green spaces. Now we are doing this sort of work for Pacific, for African countries, and I'm sure SDPI has done some great work in decarbonization sector, the scoping studies that we've done, the feasibility. So the feasibility support is very important. So that's where I think SDPI can actually sort of help these private sector organizations to pitch in their proposals for CIF, climate fund investment, to expand that portfolio. So that's one. And second is the importance of key coordination entity to disseminate the information about these funds out there. They're very much interested in, by the way, investing in Pakistan. They just don't know where to come from, whom to coordinate. I have spoken to, at COP, there were various funds I've spoken to, for example, Commonwealth Blue Charter. It's another arm that supports blue financing. There's Blue Carbon out there. There are a lot of basically entities, but I do not see that our regulators are going beyond Adaptation Fund, GCF, So, the CFU, the climate finance unit role has to be strengthened and diversify in terms of multiple climate investment financiers out there. And then SDPI and OPM could definitely provide the feasibility support and sort of further disseminate that information to the private sector, because we do have access. We are very much closely working with these folks on day-to-day basis. So that's very important. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Coming back to Asad Mahmood Saab. Asad Saab, you have been listening to this discussion and you have been part of the previous discussion when we were discussing sort of the role of financing institutions. If you have quickly any key recommendations or 2 to 3 key pointers going out with the session, and how do we actually need to go forward from this point? Yeah.
When we talk about financing institutions, so definitely we now have different mindset within the banking sector as well, and definitely they are leapfrogging in that context. And like, for example, many of the banks are going towards like IFC Edge certification and build for buildings, and definitely that is going to again push the corporate sector to look into this thing. So the trickle down effect comes from the lender. If the lenders themselves are self-aware of all the aspects and all the risks that are associated with the new technologies or new interventions, so they can always like then focus on. They can set examples for the other sectors and push the policymakers as well, if keeping in with all the international best practices and the stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sasa. Very well noted points. And this has been a wonderful discussion. I'll be very shortly coming to Zainab for her final, the concluding of the whole summit a bit shortly. But Zainab, just before going to you, and from this discussion as well as the previous discussion, I think some of the very major, I think, takeaway would be if the SDPI can actually take a lead, perhaps in the development of the pool that the central bank talked about, or the pool of green investors, perhaps. And I think linking it with this panel, perhaps you can also sort of, definitely, I fully agree that there's a difference in the Chinese as well as the European diplomacy. There's no doubt on that. But perhaps we need to come up with some sort of these perhaps connecting lines, or the communication lines that can actually bring all those stakeholders on a common platform, perhaps. So that is something which has been highlighted about the banking sector representatives. This is something that we have heard today. The good communication channels through which the concerns of communities and civil society can actually be brought to these financing institutions, whether they're from the Pakistanis end or if they're the project developers, such as when we talk about the CPEC project developers, and in fact the banks operating at the back as well. So perhaps we need to do something that can actually open up some communication channels. That is one thing that has constantly been highlighted at this panel discussion. Particularly also talked a lot about the need for building the capacity, but not just of the industries, but also of the public sector entities, because the State Bank, we all heard that the renewable energy financing scheme, just as they talked about, is currently can be obtained through one channel, but as for the current financing scheme is concerned, we might not be seeing it being sustained for a very long time because of this whole, and just like what the State Bank or the central bank representative mentioned as well. So perhaps we also need to see how we actually go about that as well. And then how do we actually build the capacity of all the financing institutions around, and how do we actually attract these alternate financing mechanisms through different tools and those as well. Further, there have been a lot of very good recommendations coming up. What SDPI always does is sort of convert these recommendations into this position paper, which we very concertedly advocate around, and we sort of forward those highlights and suggestions to the relevant stakeholders. And this time we're actually thinking of taking another step to sort of again come towards the direct working mode with the State Bank and other financing institutions as well. So with this, once again, I think each one of joining you, but before we sort of let me come to Zainab for her concluding remarks and what key takeaways she has, and then we'll be over to you, Zainab. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ubaid. I think it's been a really productive and fruitful day for all of us. Starting from early in the morning, we have had a scene setting presentation, and then a session where role of financing institutions was discussed, and we have had a representation from public and private sector banks, including the State Bank of Pakistan. So, and also the microfinance institutions. During that session, I think many challenges were already highlighted, including circular debt, high policy rate, and how the level playing field needs to be provided to all the FIs, including the MFIs, and also the issue of little financing available for the MFIs, although they are the key players when it comes to connecting with the vulnerable communities and providing support to them. And then, however, there were also opportunities that were discussed, and those opportunities that were not being availed properly. For example, the opportunities around green bonds and also giving it an Islamic touch, like Sukuk bonds, how that can be utilized for, improving the investment infrastructure in Pakistan, how innovative financing is still untapped in Pakistan, and that needs to be explored. Apart from that, I think there were many questions from the participants as well, asking about the green regulatory policy and how the disclosure reporting is, that's mandatory, but still we do not see many reports from the banks around sustainability. So that those kind of critical questions were also addressed by the participants. So I think one key takeaway was, again, that's also been highlighted by Durre Mahmood, and that was also discussed during first session, was that, for the inviting investments, international investments, I think we need to provide them with actually where they can invest in the feasibility assessments, and we need to move away from traditional financing areas. For example, the adaptation fund is not the only opportunity that we have. We do have other opportunities available as well, mobilizing private sector finance. I think for that, climate risk insurance, and then renewable energy transition, decarbonization at micro level, I think that's again something that needs to be tapped, and for that, feasibility assessments are very important. Up-to-date data is very important. So, of course, STPI and organizations like OPM and other organizations are always available for providing this kind of support. Then we have had really good discussion around carbon markets for energy transition, just energy transition partnerships, capacity building around green financing mechanisms, and then building the capacity of stakeholders around innovative tools that can be utilized to enhance the JETPs, enabling industries for tapping into the green transition funds. So I think, again, we tend to ignore the element around awareness, and that's still very much needed, and that's the requirement. Awareness around not just green financing, but overall climate and transitioning away from fossil fuels. That kind of awareness is still lacking in our country if we talk about masses. So I think the technical awareness is needed, capacity support is needed, and again, as Ms. Faiza mentioned, technology transfer is need of the hour. So I think these are some of the key recommendations, and this itself is a sort of feasibility that we have conducted from early in the morning. So I'm really thankful to all the participants, Dr. Christopher, Durre Mahmood, Faiza Khan, Mr. Asad Mahmood, and Zona for providing the insights around different topics. We also touched upon CPEC. So I think that's very much relevant. So thank you so much for joining us, and we do look forward to all of you for the support that we require, especially around the network on clean energy transition, and also in context of research and policy advocacy in Pakistan. We do look forward to having all of you in our next seminars again, for supporting us in writing the policy brief, the policy paper that will be developed after this summit concludes. And yeah, definitely. So it's been really productive, and I'm really thankful once again to all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Christoph, Ms. Faiza, Durre, Asad Saab, and Zona for all the wonderful interventions. We'll hopefully be getting back to you before we forward these recommendations to through different letters and through different dissemination events to the stakeholders in perhaps 3 to 4 days of time. Yeah, once again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It has been a wonderful session. Thank you. Bye-bye.
to thank you at the STPI, as well as all the sort of stakeholders around the table. I think it was really a very vibrant discussion, very thought-provoking.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Faiza. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the invite. Great honor.
Thank you.